Welcome back to another episode of Overnight Success. Today, I'm going to be recording a solo episode as we dig into more of the human aspect of your team and your systems. And so, when we're looking at this, every founder wants a high performing team, but honestly, your people can't outperform your systems. And so, if you have bad systems in place, you're not getting 100% out of the different team members on your team. And so we see this time and time again with our different clients, and kind of want to go into details on here so that way you as a founder can figure out how to adjust your systems or talk to your team about how you're going to improve the systems and improve that human capacity so that way you can perform better without having your employees burn out. And so if we're looking at the human systems, one of the things I always say is that you hired people on your team because they are really good at what they do. You want them to perform well and that they're really smart. And if you give them that thing to do day in and day out, they're going to perform really well. But if they're getting slowed down because of these different bottlenecks and these different systems, they're not going to perform to their best capacity. And a lot of times that leads to burnout. It leads to bad work going out the door if you're like a service-based business. And it's not always visible. Obviously, if you get bad feedback, that might be the case, or maybe you're still getting good feedback, but it's possible that you might be able to get more throughput out of your team without having to hire somebody else. And let's be honest, hiring people is very expensive. There's the onboarding, there's the up ramp, there's just them getting familiar. And on average, it's taking people 2, 3, or 4 months to really get up to full speed. And so if we can take your current team and make sure that they are operating at full capacity. And honestly, if you bring in the right systems or the right technology, they might even be able to perform, above and beyond what their normal capacity is. We kind of say 120, 130% when you bring in AI tools. Then this is really where your team is going to start to work really well and your business is going to start scaling. And so many of the clients that we work with are successful, right? From the terms of they have great revenue, their business is fully supporting their expenses. They have, a handful of employees, anywhere between 3 and 10, maybe up to 20, and they are working day in and day out. They're kind of checking in on the systems, but as long as they're delivering what the customers want, a lot of times we don't see that there's much of a problem. But when we look at that scaling aspect, we wonder, can my current team help me scale? Or if I want to double my business, am I going to have to double my workforce? And so when we are looking at the different systems for our employees, or when we're looking at systems for the company, a lot of times we just look at the bells and whistles that we want to check off the list, right? Like we want AI involved today with AI advancing. We want the AI to be really good. Maybe we're just tracking certain details, or there's this really cool automation that's out of the box inside of the system. That's kind of what we buy. But as a business owner, you are looking at this kind of from the top down as a leader. You want to make sure that you have information that you need. You want to make sure that your team kind of has the right tools. But unless you're working with your team and understanding exactly what they need in a day-to-day, they see it a lot different and when they're using the software every day versus you kind of checking in. When we build out Monday.com or ClickUp implementations, we always say, as an individual contributor, I need to be able to understand what I need to work on every day when I log in. And as a leader, I want to be able to make sure that I can understand what's happening within the business, identify those bottlenecks with reduced communication. We don't want to have to ping somebody every single time that we need an update on something. We should be able to see that inside of some type of project management system. So that way we don't have to bother them and kind of distract them. Now, I'm not a psychologist by any means, but there is a lot of information out there about how, distractions are a lot more than like that 5-minute instant message, right? So if you have Slack in your team and you ping somebody for 5 minutes to get an update on something, they don't lose 5 minutes. They're probably losing somewhere between 10 and 15. And then if they have a meeting at the top of the hour, now there's another 15-minute gap that they don't really want to start back up on what they were working on. And so the less distractions we can put into a system, the better. And the other big thing that always gets people stuck is really having, duplicate systems or really having to duplicate data inside of your systems. And so when we look at information, we're trying to make sure that we can integrate these systems. So if I have somebody in my CRM and I have a gym software that we're sending that data to the gym software automatically, or vice versa, somebody signs up through our gym software, they swipe their credit card, we want to add them to our CRM without having to type that information in. One, you're making sure that that data is consistent because humans make errors and sometimes we don't copy and paste correctly, or we don't type in things correctly, or we just forget. There was 3 people that we signed in, to the gym or got signed up, and we forgot to update the CRM. So having those systems integrated is critical, honestly. And every little one of those items that if this was a manual repeat that your employees have to do, that is kind of taken away from them using their true genius. And so I'm sure you've heard of the phrase of like death by 1,000 paper cuts, or you could kind of say like the silent bottlenecks side of your systems. These are the things that essentially kind of lead to team burnout. And so like one of 2 things happen. Either they leave because, especially like in large organizations, if you're hired as like the chief marketing officer or like the VP, or just like you're the only marketing person inside of a small business, you want to spend most of your time creating marketing campaigns and like really growing there. But if you're always having to update paperwork or, fill in a spreadsheet of what you're doing, or not really being able to use the creative part of your brain, the part that you like to use the most, then things kind of slow down. And instead of maybe being able to create 10 amazing marketing campaigns over a week, maybe you're only able to create 8 or 9. And that's only like 1 or 2 less, but like percentage wise, that's 10 to 20% less than what you do. Or maybe you're able to get 10 out, but they're just not quite as crisp as they would have been if you're able to like fully dive in and create that amazing marketing campaign. And over time, it starts to dip more and more. And so trying to make sure that the right tools are in place for that human to perform at their best capacity is critical. And great analogy, the other day, we have a car, it's an older car, it's my A to B car, and the brake light was left on overnight. And not normal lights, but the brake light. And come to find out, on the arm that holds your brake, there's this little plug, I guess you could say, that tells the car once it pushes a button whether or not you're pushing the brake or not. That's kind of the quickest way I can explain it. Anyway, the car's older, this broke, and so essentially the car did not know that the brake was disengaged. It thought it was engaged. Woke up, the battery was drained and things like that. The replacement was $5. It was a very small cap, essentially, that went back into that brake arm and it fixed everything. But this one small little piece kind of broke apart the entire system kind of fell apart because of this one plastic piece. I would argue I don't understand why it needs to be a plastic piece. It should just be part of the brake lever and they fix things out. Again, I didn't create the car. It's not my thing. But I think this really translates to your human systems, back to that like death by 1,000 paper cuts. If you have like this small annoyance or like this small pebble in your shoe, might not seem too bad the first day or the next day or the first week or month, but eventually that's going to start wearing down on your team. And whatever their capacity is kind of shifts backwards, and like their new foundation or their new baseline is less than what it used to be. And so problems don't always show up as time loss. Again, you hired somebody, you might know a little bit about their capacity, but over time that capacity might shrink a little bit, but they're still hitting deadlines, right? So hitting deadlines is a beginner metric. You want to make sure that you're definitely hitting deadlines. If not, that's a big red flag that your systems are falling apart. But you might not realize that you could get an extra 1 or 2 projects a month if you were, fully ramped up, or if your team was at full capacity. We already talked about context switching. The more apps you have, the different amount of context switching that your employees have to do. So having a system that is kind of an all-in-one is really powerful. Or if it's not an all-in-one, at least making sure that it is integrated with your other systems. So a lot of times, or actually all the time, we will use a make.com or a Zapier. There's a couple other systems out there, but essentially when a record is inserted into your first application, it sends a lot of that data over to the other application to make sure that your data is synced across apps. This is critical. These systems get better and better. A lot of them even have you use AI prompts now to just say, like a lot of times we integrate Monday with a CRM. And so every time a new item is created in Monday, I want to copy that information into the toolkit CRM or vice versa. So you can type that in human form and it'll start kind of creating the steps for you. So using tools like this are critical. We have some videos on this. There's a lot of YouTube help out there. If you want to do the 101 level of just essentially send name, email, and phone number in between systems, that's really simple. If you want to start like processing that information and using logic. It does get a little bit complicated. A shameless plug, that's where we'd love for you to call us and we could see how we can help you and support you. But most likely in this day and age, with all of the different apps that we have, I can almost guarantee that you're gonna need a make.com or a Zapier. We recommend make.com from a price perspective. I think you get a lot more integrations out of make.com for $10 to $15 or $20 a month compared to the beginner rate for Zapier at $30 a month. But that's up to you and what you want to do. I would say Zapier might be a little bit easier to use. It's kind of like an iPhone, very simple UI to use. Make.com is a little bit more like Android, gives you a little bit more flexibility and allows you to configure things a little bit tighter and add some more logic. But it's a learning curve either way, and you can kind of figure that out. So what is the easiest way to kind of start pulling back those systems? And honestly, the easiest way is going to your employees and asking them what the different pieces are. A lot of times, after a long time of inefficient systems, your team members just figure out how to get through, and they've built these workarounds, and they don't even realize that it's a problem anymore because they've been doing it the same way for a long time. I can tell you how many times we've worked with clients, they're kind of excited about the systems that they have. And when we start asking like deep dive questions, they start to realize that those systems aren't as efficient as they thought. Or as a leader, we jump on a call with a leader and we ask them some questions and they're like, oh, I'm going to have my team members answer that for you, which is perfectly fine. Like your team members are definitely going to have the most expertise in that level, but don't assume that you know everything about it from like your 30,000-foot view. And so sitting with them and honestly having them walk through what they do day in and day out is really powerful. As a business owner, I feel like we have very creative minds. We are problem solvers at heart. And so if you watch one of your employees, take 10 clicks to accomplish a very simple task, you're, as a business owner, probably going to ask, why do you do it this way? That seems really painful. But if you're not sitting there and actually asking them to walk through this, and you kind of just ask the question of, do you see any challenges with the system that you have today? Or are there any bottlenecks? They might tell you no, either one, because they don't realize that it's a bottleneck. And again, that they're just so used to doing it this way. Or two, they don't think it's bad enough. They're kind of making the judgment call of, oh, this isn't so bad. I've figured a way around it. I'm not going to raise this up and complain about it. But if you can come in and have them walk through it, you can ask those questions. And sometimes, technology can't solve it right away. But if you ask the questions like, why do you do it this way? That's where they'll start coming back with answers of, well, unfortunately, this software doesn't let us do it. Or I need to do this part in app A and this part in application B because just they only support those things and I'm copying and pasting a lot. And again, copying and pasting might only take 30 seconds, 60 seconds in between apps, but it still creates that inconsistency. If you have two monitors, it's a little bit easier, but if you're on a single screen, flipping in and out of those different applications is just kind of a pain. And I've seen over time that people aren't as efficient when it comes to copying and pasting. Quick side note here, as far as like keyboard shortcuts, this is something I always work with people on. Anytime I see people like highlight, right click and, select copy and then right click and paste, that's a slowdown. So unless your team members are like really efficient at using keyboard shortcuts and stuff, it's that little bit of copying and pasting actually adds up a lot over time. And so just understanding like the workflow that they're using as a business owner, you didn't get here by accident. So you are probably very good, again, at the problem solving and understanding systems to a decent level. So watching somebody walk through that and seeing a bunch of clicks or just seeing redundancies or repetitive data being entered, that is an immediate red flag that you can highlight and then figure out how you integrate these different systems. And so for me, when we work with different teams, we definitely look at the technology and we build the workflows and, we put the right applications in place and the right integrations in place. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we have full buy-in from the team. And everybody is, a lot of people are against change, which I fully respect. But as you start selling the value of, hey, I hired you to be, we'll go back to the marketing, my marketing person as an example. I want to make sure that you're empowered to do as much marketing campaigns or, whatever your thing is as possible. But if you keep getting stuck in these systems or have to keep jumping on meetings because it's not easy to understand the status of things, then it's difficult for them to actually get back into that flow state, right? You want them spending, if in a normal 40-hour work week, you want them spending 30 hours or more doing like what they were hired to do, not stuck in meetings with status updates stuck inside of the technology or learning that different technology. So by kind of selling them on the dream of how would you like to spend more time doing the thing you love doing versus, using all these different systems is great. There might be that learning curve for a couple weeks to a month, but if you identify the right bottlenecks and remove those, they're going to get all of that time back, which is really powerful. And so we're looking at these 5 different steps here on how you can reclaim that human capacity. Identifying those friction points, asking the team, where is my team frustrated? That is usually where the inefficiency lives. And again, just because they're not frustrated with it doesn't mean that it's not inefficient. So walking through with that, auditing these workflows and understanding where there's a lot of clicks to get a very simple task done, where there's that repetitive data entry, that's where you're going to start finding things out. So step 2 is that auditing of your workflows. Step 3, we are systemizing for clarity, not control. And so in businesses where we have project management, like a Monday or a ClickUp, they're not really for micromanagement. They're more for that shared visibility and cutting back on that communication. Spreadsheets are not a project management tool. Many of the clients that we work with that use that hire us to come in with Monday or ClickUp are because they started off in spreadsheets. Those are our best customers because they at least kind of have a loose framework, but they're using a system that is built more for math versus, the actual like project management or keeping track of tasks. So yes, that might be your central location today where you have different tasks of like in progress, done, things like that. But adding comments, getting notifications when items are done, automating data between different systems, none of that is going to be possible inside of spreadsheets unless you're a wizard at like writing macros and things like that. And so we want to make sure at the end of the day, we've got the right dashboards in place, the right views in place, and your project management systems like Monday or ClickUp, or if you're using Asana or Notion, like those are going to start giving you the views that you need to get more clarity as a leader. And then also as an individual contributor, individual team member, you're going to be able to understand, hey, I need to work on this next. Hey, I need to reach out to this person, or I understand exactly what they're working on. Step 4 is automating the boring stuff. So freeing your team's mental energy for creative, strategic work is, again, really powerful. You want them to be working in the best part of their brain that they enjoy using, not getting stuck in those repetitive items. So automating the boring stuff. A lot of systems, again, like ClickUp and Monday have great automations. If you don't have those systems, you can kind of automate a little bit of it with a make.com or a Zapier, but just understanding what they're doing day in and day out, even if it's just simple notifications, and automating that can go a really long way. And then finally, like measuring energy, not just output. Time saved is a great metric. We understand that if I can save this employee, 3 or 5 hours a week, and I pay them $20, $30, $40 a week, it's very quick to kind of calculate how much money you're saving or how much time they'd be getting back to focus on more important things. So that is that's a great start, but also want to make sure that your team is fully set up to have the most energy throughout the day. Plenty of times we've heard, if you've read any personal development book on like goal setting or mindset, for some reason, we always like to answer emails and stuff in the morning. Those are the quick wins. But for me, I have my most energy in the morning. I should not be spending my time doing emails. I should spend my time kind of doing like the tech implementations and the things that use more of my brain power and more of my energy when I have the most energy. So making sure that by putting the right tools in place, we can capitalize on when our energy is best and try to keep that energy level as high as possible. But anytime that you have like those different paper cuts or those different bottlenecks, your energy throughout the day drains. If you think about a battery or, our phone, the more we use it on silly stuff like social media and TikTok, the quicker that battery drains. So we want to make sure that we're using it for the right things and keep that energy as high as much as possible from a human perspective. And so as we kind of start wrapping this up, I think the biggest thing to focus on not only is just like the technology and the time saved, but is really sitting down with your team and understanding like what adds energy to them and what takes energy away. We have previous videos. I can give a quick synopsis of this. This is inside of Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. But essentially building a quadrant section of understanding and auditing your time spent throughout the day of what are things that make me money and how much time am I spending on those. And so things to the top right are going to be things that don't really drain energy or don't use much time and make me money. And then things on the bottom left, which is you would typically want to delegate, they're very time consuming, they're sucking energy, and I'm not making much energy off of those. And those can be things like emails and meetings and things like that. So doing that audit with your team to understand what they're good at and what's going to produce revenue for your business, that's what you want to make sure they're spending as much time doing. And then identifying those bottlenecks that aren't really generating much revenue and also draining that energy from your team. Those are the things you want to look at automating. As a business owner, you can delegate that to your team, to somebody that really likes doing that, like accounting. But if there's other things in place from a systems perspective that maybe your accountant can't, your accountant's doing the numbers, but they don't have access to the right tools or they don't have access to the right information to do their job, that's draining. So you want them, again, doing as much of what you hired them to do as possible, which empowers them to do better things. When people aren't drained like this is where they really buy into the company. As a business owner, this is your baby. You are 100% committed to this company. Your employees, at the end of the day, this is a job for them. Hopefully you have the right culture in place that they're invested in this business almost as much as you are. But by creating these great systems and giving them that power back to do what they love doing most, that's where we're going to get the most buy-in, and that's where they're going to be able to produce more from a time perspective as well as quality. And so if you're scaling a small business and your biggest lever isn't hiring more, it's freeing the people you already have. And so if we can get away without hiring people, doing the onboarding, doing the ramping up, and actually taking your current team and getting extra capacity out of them, that is really where you as a business owner scale. And your team, this isn't like trying to take the most out of your team. I always think to like the Amazon workers inside of the plan. We've all heard the horror stories where essentially like they have scheduled bathroom breaks and things like that. I'm not saying that we get every single second out of every team member on your team, but just giving them the time and energy that they deserve. And so that produces a better business at scale. And so if you want a technology audit or just a systems audit of what you have in place today, set up a call with us, theoptimizationspecialist.com/call. We'd love to jump on there, right? Just to kind of see what you're doing. But even if you don't give us a call, I think as a business owner, it's very easy to sit down with your team and say, especially this time of year as we're going into the new year, and just saying, hey, we're trying to identify these bottlenecks so we can help this business grow. We want to sit down with each and every one of you to understand like what your day in and day out looks like. They can definitely tell you about any friction points that they have, but unless you sit down with them and watch them carry on the work, there's probably going to be some of those items that, or the friction that isn't immediately found. So sitting down with your team and going through that is really powerful. And so if you can save 2, 3, 4 hours a team member and you have a team of 5, that is a lot of time back every month, and it gives them that power to go do better work. So thanks for joining me today on the solo episode. This is something that we see time day in and day out with our clients. That is really where we come in and shine and really enjoy getting the technology dialed in. But really, a lot of it evolves around the humans and the energy that comes out of getting those right systems in place.